Okay, let's get started. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Len Thompson, and I'm the Community Manager for the CA Workload Automation community. Thanks for joining us today for our latest Lunch and Learn series webcast. As you can see on your screen, today we're joined by Karen Cleaver, who will be covering how to move from SAP, Oracle, and PeopleSoft Adapters and onto the CA Workload Automation Business Agent, excuse me. Before I hand you off to Karen, if you have any questions along the way, please use the Q&A feature in the WebEx in the lower right of your screen. You should see a box there. If you don't see that box, just click the question mark icon in the upper right of the screen, and it will open up for you. And also, if you're dialed into the conference line, because I think some of you might be, please mute your line unless you have questions at the end. We are recording today's session, and we'd like the recording to be as clean as possible. And with that, Karen, I'll hand everyone over to you.
Thanks, Len. So good day, everyone. This is actually a presentation that I gave at CA World in November this year regarding moving from the adapters to the new business agents that were introduced in 11.3 of AutoSys and CA7 with the new system agent. So what we wanted to talk about was how do I get from the adapter to the plug-in, what are some of the gaps, what do I need to look for, what's involved in the process, and going forward. So this doesn't want to. I'm just trying to get there we go. Okay, I'm going to skip through the information and the abstract and the legalese. Okay, so the first thing is that if you look back at your adapter jobs today, regardless of the ERP system, they run as command jobs in AutoSys. So they run on a system agent, they'll run on the old legacy agents, they'll work from AutoSys, they work from CA7, they use the standard features with standard out, standard error, all of those types of things. All of the parameters that you pass are keyword or context-based, and it's in a single line. So it's just another command job. There's really no differentiating between a job that runs one of your scripts and the job that runs the binary for an SAP job or an Oracle job. No syntax checking on the command line, so if somebody makes a typo, you're not going to find out until you actually go to run the job that that variant is wrong, the report's wrong, the request set is wrong. So there's a lot of potential for typos and errors, and most people manage the adapter job through Jill rather than actually entering it in on the WCC. So in the past, there was no conversion tool. When we first brought out the 11.3 of AutoSys and the 11.3 agents, we didn't have a conversion utility for you to move from the adapter to the plugin. There were some gaps in functionality between the two. People were using the adapters in a certain way that didn't lend itself in moving to the plugins. Probably the most common one I've come across in dealing with customers looking to make this transition is they had more important things to do. They were running on older versions of AutoSys or on CA7. They needed to get upgraded. Maybe they wanted to implement EAM for AutoSys. They were implementing iDash. They were doing operating system upgrades, database upgrades, any number of things. But if it isn't broken, leave it alone. So the adapter job had a tendency to stay as adapter job without really moving anywhere to the plugin. Now there are clients who have made this move already, are successfully running with the plugin, so we want to do as much as we can to help you get to the new agent, because there are some advantages, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So basically, it's time to consider phase 2 of your upgrade to 11.3.5, 6, service pack, whatever, and utilizing the new agent. Okay. So we now have a conversion utility for all three of the adapters. So we have one for SAP, we have one for Oracle, and one for PeopleSoft. And the majority of the gaps have been addressed. Now, when I gone through this process with a few customers, we still find some gaps. And at that point, it's a question of, do we go to product management at CA and say, here's a gap that needs to be addressed, or is there a workaround that suits your requirements as a user of the adapter? So one of the things I always like to tell people is if you're going through this process and you find that gap, let us know. Call your strategist, your pre-sales person, our product management if you have a relationship with them, and say, this is a gap that I've discovered between the adapter and the plugin. How can it be addressed? And we have made changes based on the gaps that have been identified by our customers between the two adapters. Okay, so one of the questions I always get, is this going to take a long time? What are the risks? Like, what am I going to run into? And do I really have to do this? How will my jobs change? Okay, so is it going to take a long time? That really depends on the way you are using the adapters. It will depend on the way you want to use the plugin. The risks, finding a gap, okay? Finding that showstopper gap. The good news is the adapters aren't going away today or tomorrow. They do not have an end of support. They do not have an end of life. They're not going away. So the risks are kind of minimal. If something doesn't work with the plugin, you can keep running it with the adapter. Do you really have to do this? No. But I will say that if you are looking at newer versions of Oracle, E-Biz, or you're looking at newer SAP, chances are the plugin will be brought up to certification before the adapter. And the adapter will probably be done based on user demands. Okay, so that's one of the reasons to consider making the switch. How will your jobs change? Depending on which ERP you're running. For some, the changes aren't that great. For others, they're fairly significant. One of the things, the do I really have to do this, is you can actually have both the adapter and the plugin running at the same time. So the transition doesn't have to be a big bang. It can be done job by job, set of jobs, server by server, instance by instance, depending on how you want to address it. So just be aware it's not something that you have to do overnight and suddenly tomorrow you're running with the adapter. Or the plugin, sorry. I get confused. All right, so what's involved in this conversion? Well, the command jobs as they exist, if you look at, and I'm going to use autos most of the time, but the same is true for 7. They're command jobs. The command says SAP job, auto_PS7. Those command jobs become the new job type. So their JIL changes completely. The command goes away. They're now a job type of PS job, SAP job, SAP copy job, process chain. They all become a new job type. So those parameters that you had on your command line actually translate to JIL attributes within your job definition. So now you'll see attributes like RSC connection, client number, which are particular to SAP. One of the big differences, and this is where we have to look at how you're managing these, is that with the plugin, there are no standard out or standard error files. Okay, everything is done through the spool file. If you've worked with any of the new job types within AutoSys, you know that there's no standard out, standard error. We now write to a spool file, easily accessible through WCC, a little bit of tweaking to access them through a terminal session. So that's one of the things where we have to take a look at what do you do with your standard out and your standard error today, and how can we switch that over to spool files. I have some people who move the standard out and standard error off, they archive them. So those are the kinds of things you kind of have to look at. How am I doing that today, and how is changing that going to impact going forward? Okay? Now, if you haven't already done it, the way to acquire the conversion utility for your implementation is to open a support ticket. Go in, open the support ticket, AutoSys CA7, and just say, I would like the conversion utility for SAP, and you will be sent a jar file and a script file and some documentation. Pretty straightforward documentation, how to run it, but that's how you get it. You're not going to go and download it from anywhere or find it. It's through a support ticket. Okay, so let's talk about SAP first. And it's not a secret. This is the most complex one. And I'm not going to expect you guys to all jump in here, but quiz. How many command lines are there for the SAP adapter? Most people use SAP Job and maybe cap chain. So running an SAP R3 job, running a process chain. There's some other ones to manage variants, to send system messages, but those are the two. And we translate that over into 6 SAP job types. So now you've gone from a command line to several different job types. And without a conversion utility, if you're doing things like batch input sessions, or you're doing info packages, or data archiving, those have now become separate job types. So the conversion utility makes that translation from a single command line to multiple job types for you. Okay, so the first thing it will do, and this is a challenge for some of the SAP customers I know, is that you've spent time setting up the configuration assistant. You have user IDs in there, you have passwords in there, you have profile information in there, to the point where you may not even remember the password for some of those users in the configuration assistant. And if you change the password, there's a chance that other things will stop working. So one of the things we did as part of the SAP conversion utility was we actually take the information that's in the conversion files, that directory structure that looks like a Windows registry, and we translate that into secure IDs and passwords within AutoSys Secure. Okay? So in the new plugins, you don't maintain the users in a file on the agent machine. The user IDs and passwords are managed within AutoSys Secure. So that's another difference to be aware of. For the SAP-specific jobs, the other part of the conversion utility will take those jobs and it will take a JIL and it will translate it to the new job type. So if it's an SAP copy job, it creates a copy job within AutoSys. If it's creating a job from scratch, report variant, it will create what we call an R3 job or an SAP job. Yeah? And it also goes out and creates the systemid.properties file for each SAP connection. So if in your SAP configuration file you've defined 200 SAP systems, okay, this will actually create those 200 system.properties files for you. And you can decide how you want to architect your plugins and your SAP instances. We're not going to get into licensing today. That took us an hour at World. But just realize that this will convert the majority of the data from the adapter to the plugin. So what are the prerequisites? And normally I wouldn't bother with this, but having been through this a couple of times with some customers, the biggest gotcha we came across was making sure, number one, that the JRE that we're using is 32-bit and is 1.6 or higher, and on AIX 1.7, and that you run the utility in an AutoSys environment. So the utility gets loaded on the machine where the adapter is and gets run from there. The reason with SAP that we need the 32-bit Java is because the SAP adapter libraries are 32-bit Java, and we actually use some of them. So 64-bit Java will not work, it needs to be 32-bit. So we talked, I mentioned gaps. So if you actually go into the conversion doc and look at it, it goes through and it lists every parameter in the SAP job cap chain command line and tells you which ones are supported and which ones aren't. And if you run through the conversion utility, it will also tell you, it will flag any that this parameter is not supported, this profile couldn't be found, things like that. So, and I'm going to show you an example of a converted job. So that's one. Event management integration. If you're using event management and you had an NSM notification in the job, things like that, that integration isn't there, okay? Because the new system agent doesn't recognize event management. If you send messages, you can still pick them up. SAP job logs directed to standard out. Okay? You can actually get the SAP job logs. They go into the spool file. You can request the step ones be emailed, which is kind of interesting in the job definition, so there's some flexibility there. You no longer have, because you don't have the you don't have the configuration assistant and you don't have the job scheduling assistant, you can't, through AutoSys, run an ad hoc job from a terminal session. You would actually have to log into SAP or into AutoSys if the job exists there and schedule it from there. With the SAP adapter, you could actually do an SAP job from the command line within the system. Can't do that anymore. Not sure how many people did that, but being upfront, can't do it. You can't broadcast messages to the SAP users. That was the command line CA SAP message. I don't know too many people have raised a red flag on this one. One that does raise eyebrows sometimes, and it depends on if you're using it. If you were using the CA SAP bar, and this was a binary that allowed you to go in and change the value of a variant, okay, before you ran a job. So you could run one job that maintained the variant and the next job used that variant. That ability is no longer available with the plugin. You can't manage the variant values, okay? Load balancing at the job level. You could still load balance within AutoSys, but realize that we're not really doing anything on the SAP side. We're more or less saying, you're doing it at the agent level, not at the instance level. So the only way to get the true load balancing is to have SAP do the load balancing to whichever application server you want or it wants to send the job to. Okay? And lastly, the other gap is there's no SAP job intersection. That's not a function of the plugin. Once again, if any of these gaps are showstoppers for you, if there's anything here that raises a flag and you go, well, I do that in every job, or I do that in 50% of my jobs, raise the issue with us, i.e. CA, and let's talk about it, see what we can do to help you bridge that gap, whether it's making a change to the plugin, whether it's finding a workaround. We want to get you moved to the new agent. The new plugin type. Okay? So here's a sample of the SAP. So this is actually taken live from a client, so that's why we have that lovely job name. So basically, in the adapter, we have a standard AutoSys job. Command is SAP, job name, variant, job user, change to protect the innocent, and the profile. Okay? The machine. This is the machine where the agent is, not where SAP is. Owner, AutoSys, standard out, standard error. And there were date, time, conditions on here. That basically comes straight across. So this is what that job looked like with the adapter. So when we convert it, and this is actually taken directly from the conversion output, The job name stays the same. Now, you have the ability to go in and edit the JIL that's created. So if you wanted to put in there new, whatever the job name was, you can do that. Okay, so you don't have to delete the old ones to put the new ones in. You can just rename them. Okay, SAP job name. What's the name of the job we're creating? What's the step parameters? So if you have a multi-step job, you'll have multiple name, add that name variants here for the steps. The machine is where the plugin is. We also tell it what SAP system we're going to, the client number, the host name, and the owner. Now, the last 4 fields were information that was stored in the configuration assistant that we've taken out and we put it into the job and we put it into the AutoSys Secure. Notice now that the SAP, the owner of the job is no longer the user ID that runs the agent, okay, or runs the job. This is now an SAP user qualified with the instance and the client number, and that's been added to AutoSys Secure by the conversion utility. And so you can see there are some major changes. So doing this conversion isn't something I suggest you do and don't test. Okay? Pick some samples, make sure that everything's working. Do you need to test every job? And whether it's PeopleSoft, Oracle, or SAP, I kind of look at it the same way. Pick a group that represents the different parameters you use, the different, like with Oracle with the request set, pick those different ones, test those. If you really want to make sure everything's functioning fine, test every job. But if you have 40,000 jobs, that's a lot of testing. So it's really up to you to determine the best way to approach the testing of these new jobs. Okay. So Oracle and PeopleSoft, I kind of group these two together because they're a little different than SAP, just by the methodology that we use. With Oracle, we work with Oracle's RFC calls, remote function calls, their external batch processing APIs. With Oracle and PeopleSoft, we're going into their database and putting things in there and watching them run. We're going through Concurrent Manager. We're going through People Tools Scheduler. The jobs have to exist in Oracle or in PeopleSoft, and we just run them. We can't actually create them. Okay? So that hasn't changed. So with Oracle and PeopleSoft, we do the conversion of the JIL. PeopleSoft, we also add the users into AutoSys Secure. So we go and we look at that hidden .rc file for PeopleSoft, and we translate those and add them into AutoSys Secure. Oracle, it's a DIY project that you're going to need to add those users to AutoSys Secure. Now, if you have hundreds of them, give us a call. Let's see what we can do. You must create the properties file on the agent machine. So whether it's an SAP instance, a PeopleSoft, or an Oracle instance, there's a instance.properties file on the agent machine. For these two, you have to create that file. And you'll see what the file looks like the first time you do an install of the plugin. It's going to ask you PeopleSoft instance, database user, People Tools user. So it'll ask you for that information and create the properties file. And as I said, for the Oracle piece, you have to create the users in AutoSys Secure. Okay. So deleting the old adapter job messes with history. Yes, it does. So Jim asked the question, when you delete the old adapter job, you will lose their history. Okay, so just so you're aware of that, under any circumstances, if you delete a job, you lose its history. So just be aware of that and figure out the best way to manage it, especially if you're using any kind of an SLA management tool that may come into play. Okay, so, but that's a decision that you have to make. Do I keep the job name? Do I just update it? Okay. Insert, delete. Okay. Yeah. So one of the other things, the example I showed was an SAP job. for AutoSys, the conversion utility, will also handle the auto R3V45 and auto what R3, I think it is. So we will handle those previous SAP adapter command lines as well. We'll make those conversions, and that's all documented. Okay. All right. So over to the Oracle side, in the adapter, you run the CA OP11 command line. You give it parameters. You can do single requests. You can do request set. You can copy a request. So what that translates to, okay. So what that translates to is 3 new job types, and they're listed there. Copy single request, so they match up to the text that's there. So what the Oracle conversion is going to do is take the CAOP11, look at the parameters, say, okay, this is a copy, this is a request set, this is a single request. And it's going to translate the job based on the information that's on that command line. So here's a sample of an Oracle job. We're running the command. We're giving it a request set. Notice it's running on a local system with Bob at Sahara. Once again, standard out, standard error. And when we make the transition, notice my attributes have changed. I'm specifying an Oracle user. My machine is the agent. In this case, the owner didn't change. And that's going to depend on how you set up your Oracle users within AutoSys. Some people have created Unix IDs for them, so that's something you have to take a look at. But the important thing to notice is job type changes from command to a specific job type, and the parameters become job attributes. Now, one of the pluses here is that now when you go to create a job, if you go into WCC and you say, I want to create an Oracle single request, okay, or request set, you're going to be presented with a panel that has these fields. So you're going to be able to enter them in, and you could even create templates for jobs, Oracle jobs, so that your users, your schedulers only have to change minimum fields or add minimum information to a job. And that way you can reduce any kind of errors caused by typos or that type of thing. Same applies for SAP. And the one advantage with SAP is you can actually go and get a pull down of the ABAP programs or the process chains that are available. So here's another example of an Oracle job, and this is translating into a request set. Okay, so we've got the request set name, the application name, any program data that we're going to pass to it, and once again, the job type, the Oracle user, the owner. Okay. Now, on the PeopleSoft side, this one is pretty straightforward because we go from one job type to one job type. So we go from a command line running auto PS7, if you're older than that, PS6, and we translate that to the PeopleSoft job type. Okay, fairly straightforward. So in this case, there are some limitations and prerequisites. And in the case of PeopleSoft, the way the plugin works is the plugin supports a single PeopleSoft instance per agent. Okay, and there are some things that the plugin doesn't currently support in terms of job types within PeopleSoft. So the one that's mentioned here is the PeopleSoft job set. Okay, if you're running those with the PeopleSoft adapter, that same functionality is not available in the plugin. Okay, prerequisites here, basically the same as for SAP. Have to have a current Java, 1.6 for everything but AIX, where it's 1.7. Utility runs the same way, load it on the adapter machine, run it, and basically the PeopleSoft also translates the user IDs. So it will take those user IDs and it will put it into AutoSecure out of the .rc. So here's my sample PeopleSoft. This is a PS process type, PeopleSoft process job. So my command, my job type here, SR, parameters, machine, owner, and that translates to insert a PeopleSoft job. It's an SQR report. Here's my control ID, my process name, my operator. It works exactly the same way as the adapter in that we go in and we run the job, we watch the tables in PeopleSoft. When we get the status, the agent, we get it back, and we go and update AutoSys with success or failure. So the one thing I did do here was I just kind of threw in the WCC panel for a PeopleSoft job type. So you'll see we can give it a process name, a type, and then all the parameters that you would normally put on the command line are actually Jill attributes within the job. Okay. All right. So that was not as many questions this time. So I guess open it up for questions. I'll answer the best I can. If I don't have an answer off the top of my head, I will definitely take note and get answers back to you. So that being said, if you want to unmute or pop up your questions, that would be great.
Yeah, hi, Karen. There's actually a couple questions in the Q&A. I'll read them to you. The first one goes back to SAP, actually. Are there plans to provide the CA SAP VAR functionality for the SAP agent in the future? And if yes, what would the timeline be?
Can you read that to me again?
Sure. Yeah, are there plans to provide the CA SAP VAR, I'm sorry if I'm spelling, functionality for the SAP agent, and what would the timeline be?
Okay, I am not sure. I know we've talked about it. I haven't heard a time frame, but I will get back. I will get an answer, and what I'll do is I'll post it up on the communities. Great.
And then the other question we have is, do you have an example of the properties.xxx file you mentioned?
For SAP, Oracle, or
I think that came in during the Oracle portion.
Okay, the Oracle portion. Do I have one? I'm thinking if I have one on my demo system. I don't think I do, but I can get one. I can get one.
All right. I don't see any other questions, but we'll give everyone a minute or two to type furiously. Oh, here we go. Here's another one. Karen, very general question, but can you tell me how event management is affected with the plugin?
Well, it really depends on what you were using event management for. If you were looking for specific messages that were coming into, say, the event daemon, they may not come into the event daemon anymore. They may actually go into the agent log instead. So it would really depend on what you were looking for event management. If you were sending system messages or that type of thing, a lot of those messages are written to the spool file and they're written to the agent log. They're not written to the event daemon.
Great, thanks, Karen. Do we have any other questions, everybody? Oh, there's one. Is there any way to use external variables in the OASG jobs?
External variables in the, as in a global variable or an environment variable?
We'll give Michael a moment to respond.
Sure.
No follow-up so far.
Okay. So it comes down to, I think this is what it comes down to, is there are places in the metadata within jobs where you can't use a global variable, $, or an environment variable. And this may be one of those places, but I know one of the things that's being talked about is expanding the use of global variables into the metadata. It's not there yet, but it's definitely something that we're looking at, because even to do say a one-time override is another thing people want to do on the metadata, is come in and change a parameter and basically be able to go in with a one-time override, change the parameter, have the job run, and have it revert back to what it was. So being able to do a one-time override or to do the global variable or environment variable would, I think, address what this person was looking for. And I know we're looking at it. If you haven't put in an enhancement request on the ideation site, you guys knew that was coming. If you haven't put in an ideation request, go ahead and put one in. That's the best way to get it addressed.
Great. We have another question. Can I get the plugin spool file by autosyslog?
By autosyslog. I'm thinking. So you're asking, is the spool file name written to the event daemon?
The spool file of plugin.
Okay.
So,
well, he's asking that. So for those of you who haven't used a lot of the new job types, one of the things that with the new agent is there's no standard out, standard error, and what we do is we create a spool file. And that spool file is easy to find in WCC. You just go to the job runs, you say, I want to look at the spool file, it brings it up. When you go to look for it on a system in AutoSys, it's built on a directory structure and what we call a workload object ID. So you don't see the job name in the name of the spool file, which is why I said if you're doing something today with those spool files where you're moving them offline, then what we need to do is figure out the best way for you to get that information so that you can move the spool files and keep them like you're keeping them today with the adapter. Has anybody out there done any kind of scripting or written a process to move the spool files, to discover their name and move them? Okay.
Nothing coming in.
Okay.
All right, so if there aren't any other questions, folks, we can wrap up for the day. Just so everyone's aware, like I said, I'm recording the session, so the replay will be available either later today or tomorrow. And if you have any questions that you think of after the fact, feel free to put them out in the community, and either Karen or I will make sure that we get you an answer.
Yeah, well, most definitely. That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for. And I don't see any other questions, so I think we'll wrap it up. Karen, thank you very much, and to our attendees, thank you very much as well. Have a great day, and keep an eye out for our next announcement, for the next lunch and learn.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.